Let's take your seats. Okay, that was the hardest part of the whole evening. Just getting everybody to stop talking for a few minutes. So let us now start the evening. Please rise for the singing of the national anthem by the Honorable Jennifer Walker Elrod, Judge of the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you will join with me in singing our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you. Please be seated. This is the 26th annual John Hemphill Dinner, and I am speaking to you as the president of the Texas Supreme Court Historical Society, and I welcome everyone here tonight. We have a number of special guests. To start with, we have every member of the Texas Supreme Court here tonight, and I would ask them to stand. We have Chief Justice Nathan Hecht, Justice Deborah Lehrman, Justice Jeff Boyd, Justice John Devine, Justice Jimmy Blacklock, Justice Brett Busby, Justice Jane Bland, Justice Rebecca Huddle, and welcome to Justice Evan Young. We are also graced by the presence of a number of former Texas Supreme Court justices, and I'm going to ask them to stand as well. They are Chief Justice Thomas Phillips, Chief Justice Wallace Jefferson, Justice Priscilla Owen, who is now the Chief Judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, Justice Craig Enoch, Justice Dale Wainwright, and Justice Jeff Brown, who is now sitting on the Federal District Court for the Southern District of Texas. Welcome to all of them. And Justice Paul Green. All right. We also have with us tonight, I'm so sorry. Oh, Justice Rodriguez, I was going to recognize you later. Anyone else? Okay. All right. We also have with us many past and present jurists from all of the following: the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, the federal district courts, Texas state courts of appeals, the Texas state trial courts, and the Texas county courts at law. I'm going to ask you, if that has described you, please stand up so you can be recognized and let us acknowledge them. Thank you. Finally, we have several of the leaders of the State Bar of Texas who are with us tonight. And would you please stand up and be recognized? And I want to recognize Aaliyah Adkins, who was the chair of the dinner committee. That's always an enormous job, and it was particularly so this year, trying to hopscotch through the various COVID variants that we had going on during the planning of all of this. And so, Aaliyah, if you are here, please stand up. I think she may have run into difficulties getting here tonight. So, but we all owe a round of applause for Aaliyah. So, I am now going to invite to the podium Chief Justice Hecht, who is going to introduce our newest justices, Justice Rebecca Huddle and Justice Evan Young.
Thanks very much, Cynthia. Following the departure of Justice Paul Green and Justice Eva Guzman, the court is pleased to have two new justices. Well, no, that's not right. That makes it sound like we're happy to see them go. Who writes this stuff? We're sorry to see Justice Green and Justice Guzman go. We're grateful to them for their many years of service, and we wish them both the best. Please join me in recognizing again their service to the court and the people of Texas, Justice Paul Green. What the court is pleased about is having the two new colleagues we have, Justice Rebecca Huddle and Justice Evan Young. They are the 37th and 38th justices with whom I've had the honor to serve. And I'm anxious to see how they stack up against the previous 36, as I know you are. Justice Huddle is off to a good start. She took office in October 2020 and has an entire term under her belt already. And I'm happy to report that in all the opinions Justice Huddle has written for the court so far, she has agreed with me. Actually, all but one were unanimous, but the one almost was, and I still take it as a good sign. And we'll see how well Justice Young does. We have not had an opportunity to invest Justice Huddle in office in the House chamber, as is our practice for new justices, due to COVID and the regular legislative session, followed by the first special session, followed by the second special session, followed by the third special session. And now that it appears that the legislature has ceased meeting, we plan to celebrate Justice Huddle's formal investiture in the House chamber a week from today, Friday, December 10th at 2:30. Mark it down. Please come. A first-generation American born and raised in El Paso, the youngest of 5 kids, Rebecca Asperu earned her undergraduate degree from Stanford University in political science and taught Spanish for a year before returning to Texas for law school. She received her law degree with honors from the University of Texas, then joined the Baker Botts law firm in Houston, where she worked for 12 years in commercial litigation, and Appeals before Governor Rick Perry appointed her to the First District Court of Appeals in 2011. She left the bench in 2017 to return to Baker Botts, most recently serving as partner in charge of the Houston office. Rebecca has done it all, from trying car wreck cases in Brazoria County to writing 400-plus opinions on the Court of Appeals to managing an international law firm's commercial litigation practice, all before the age of, at a very young age. And all the while maintaining a cheerful, unassuming, and utterly disarming personality. Rebecca is married to Greg, whom she met by moving into a home across the street from his, and together they have two beautiful daughters, Isabel and Emma. Evan holds his undergraduate degree from Duke University, where he graduated summa cum laude, a member of Phi Beta Kappa, majoring in history with minors in Japanese and political science. He took his law degree from Yale University, as did Justice Blacklock, giving us two Yale lawyers, a challenge we are trying to meet. I was Yale undergrad, but that's totally different. Evan also has a degree in modern history from Oxford University. He clerked for the late Justice Anton Scalia, a good friend of our court for many, many years, and we miss him today. At DOJ, Evan served as counsel to Attorney General Alberto Gonzalez, an alumnus of our court, and while there he accepted a year-long detail to Iraq, assisting the Iraqi government in strengthening its legal system. Evan joined Baker Botts in 2009 and most recently chaired the firm's Supreme Court and constitutional law practice, arguing many cases in our court and the United States Supreme Court. He's been a member of the Texas Judicial Council and a member of the Supreme Court Rules Advisory Committee. And to top it off, as a teen in San Antonio, Evan wrote a biography of U.S. Supreme Court Justice Tom Clark, for whom Evans High School was named, and actually the building right across from the Supreme Court building. Evan is married to Toby Young, who, among her very many accomplishments, was counsel for a while to President George W. Bush, 43, and a law clerk for Justice Neil Gorsuch. Evan and Toby have a daughter, Romilly. I present them together to you so as not to give away who has the most fans present. Rebecca and Evan, please stand, accept our applause. Welcome to the court.
I'm going to call to the podium Jonathan Smaby, who is the Executive Director of the Texas Center for Legal Ethics. And together with Chief Justice Hecht, they will present the Jack Pope Professionalism Award.
Very good, thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks to the Society for letting us do this once again. And it's great to see live faces. This is my first event, actually, since COVID started, so I'm glad to see that you're not all little boxes on my screen that I have to wear my reading glasses to see. So Jack Pope, Chief Justice Jack Pope, was one of the founders of the Texas Center for Legal Ethics, and he created our organization to carry out our mission, which is to devotion to ethics and professionalism. Of course, Chief Justice Pope was very active in that area and set a great example. So 13 years ago, we created this award, the Chief Justice Jack Pope Professionalism Award, to honor that legacy, and it honors an appellate judge or appellate lawyer who, like Chief Justice Pope, represents the highest standards of professionalism, integrity in our profession. And I was thinking about this award tonight, And I was thinking about all the people who've won it before, and it's quite a distinguished group. In fact, I counted, I think, 4 or 5 of you who are here tonight, and I'm going to go off script. And can I ask you to stand if you've won the Chief Justice Jack Pope Professionalism Award, and I will call you out if you don't stand. So, I know. So one of the great parts of my job is, as executive director of the center, I sit on the selection committee for the Pope Award, and so I get to read all of the nominations that are sent, and I get to see them first before the rest of the committee does. And it's a great joy, because I've been thinking about this during these times where we see so much incivility out in society and so much arguing and things that are very unpleasant. And the nomination letters are great because they're written by people who know the people that they are nominating. And what I find extraordinary is they not only mention the achievements that these people have accomplished, their resumes, which are substantial, by the way, for everyone who's ever won this award, but it also talks about their personal demeanor. It talks about how they conduct themselves personally and how they interact with other lawyers and clients and for judges, people who are in their court. And the words decency and honesty and kindness come up. And so you get this kind of human look at the folks who are nominated. And some of them are great. They don't win the award. We get lots of nominations. And so I want you to think about tonight as you hear about tonight's honoree, who definitely fits that bill. And I'm hoping that as you hear the award presented and you hear about this person and you hear from this person, that you will be inspired as well. So by tradition, the current Chief Justice always makes the presentation of the award. So I'm going to call on Chief Justice Hecht to make the announcement.
Thank you, Jonathan. When Judge Higginbotham swore me in as a district judge 40 years ago, he told me, in most cases, someone wins, someone loses. So you start out with a 50-50 popularity rating, and it goes downhill from there. That has not been true of our honoree tonight, Ann Crawford McClure. The longer she has served the bench, nearly 25 years on the El Paso Court of Appeals, the last 9 as Chief Justice, the more highly regarded she has become. And she started out pretty high. For years, she was named among the best family lawyers in America. She chaired the appellate section, the family law section, the appellate division of the judicial section of the State Bar of Texas. She was president of the El Paso Bar Association, the Trans-Pecos Bar Association, and wherever she served, she championed civility and ethical excellence in the bar. As a justice, she helped draft the first standards for appellate advocacy. She was continually recognized as a Jurist of the Year by one group and another, and received numerous awards, which I can't list them all tonight. In 2011, Governor Perry appointed her the 14th Chief Justice of the El Paso Court of Appeals and the first woman in the court's 100-year history. Altogether, she authored, remarkably, for the court more than 3,150 opinions, 3,150, known for their thoroughness, analysis, and good sense. The work of an appellate judge is a climb. The work of a Chief Justice is steeper. Doing both with multiple sclerosis, about which Ann has always been very open, is scaling a mountain. Beating the disease back time and again is topping Mount Everest. And doing it all with grace, courage, leadership, and dedication to the cause of justice as well. I've run out of superlatives. Stellar, maybe. And Ann is a star. In 2019, she finally chose to step aside from the court to spend more time with her husband, David, her children, Kinsey and Scott, and her grandchildren, Luke and Audrey. The court staff was as dedicated to their chief as she was to them and stayed with her to the end. Respected and regarded are high praise for judges. They certainly fit Ann, but more, she is beloved. The Chief Justice Jack Pope Professionalism Award is presented each year by the Texas Center for Legal Ethics to the Texas appellate lawyer or judge who epitomizes the highest level of professionalism and integrity. And Crawford McClure does.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am deeply humbled and honored to receive this year's Chief Justice Jack Pope Professionalism Award. And it means a great deal because professionalism was the theme I chose when I served as president of the El Paso Bar Association. As an appellate justice, I have seen the best and the worst of attorney behavior. And that's the reason why the Eighth Court of Appeals became the first appellate court in the country to adopt standards of appellate conduct. Tonight is the highlight of my career, a toast, if you will, to my 42 years as an attorney. And I wish I could be there in person to thank you for the memories. But my health condition will not permit that, I'm sorry to say. Many of you know that I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 25 years ago. MS is an autoimmune disease without a cure, although there are a variety of treatments that can reduce the severity of a relapse or manage the myriad of symptoms that come along with it. 2 years ago, age and disease progression caused me to retire a little earlier than I planned. And then came the pandemic. That was enough to scare this West Texas woman right out of her Lucchese boots. I still take a potent immunosuppressant drug, and it works fairly well, although not as well as it used to for me, but it completely negates the COVID vaccine. Despite 2 initial doses and a subsequent booster, the COVID antibody spike protein tests that I have received have resulted in negative findings, meaning that I have no COVID antibodies. For that reason, I am at high risk of serious disease and death, and my neurologist will not allow me to travel. Thankfully, my husband and I are both retired now, happily isolating at home together. As we like to say, every day is Saturday. But tonight, I regret the necessity of isolation. Please do not take my absence as having any bearing on the significance of this award to me. It means the world. I wish you a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. May God bless us, each and every one. Thank you and good night.
Everyone should be seated except for Aaliyah Adkins. Would you please stand up? We applauded for you earlier for all of your hard work as chair. And now we get to do that for your face, so thank you very much. We now have a tribute for the former Texas Supreme Court Justice and former Fifth Circuit Judge Thomas Reavley, who passed away approximately a year ago. Judge Elrod and Justice Boyd will help us remember Judge Reavley's extraordinary life.
Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to celebrate a one-of-a-kind jurist and wonderful man, Judge Thomas M. Reavley, who passed away almost a year to the day on December 1st, 2020, while still serving as a judge on the Fifth Circuit at the age of 99. Judge Reavley was a servant to his core, spending nearly all of his life serving Texas and serving his country. He was born in Quitman, Texas, and raised in Nacogdoches. He graduated from the University of Texas in 1942. He enlisted in the Navy, where he served his country overseas during World War II. During this time, he had the privilege of being part of a secret convoy with President Roosevelt to attend a meeting with Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin at the Yalta Conference, where the leaders discussed the fate of post-war Germany. A torpedo almost scuttled the entire mission. When he returned, he earned his law degree from Harvard and began a career dedicated to public service. Assistant District Attorney in Dallas, Nacogdoches County Attorney, Texas Secretary of State, District Court Judge in Austin, Texas Supreme Court Judge, and then President Carter nominated Judge Reavley to the Fifth Circuit, where he served for the last 40 years of his life. His later bride, Carolyn King, was in the same confirmation hearing. And apparently, and she's here with us tonight. Judge Reavley took most of the questions, so she didn't have to answer very many. That's always a relief. Judge King is a formidable jurist in her own right. She's someone that I have called chief, along with the chief here in this room, and she's also received the highest award given to any federal judge in America, called the Devitt Award. So we are very privileged to have Judge King join us tonight. Judge Reavley was a titan of the Texas legal industry, and he also found the time to contribute significant scholarship, often focused on the role of judges and the importance of the rule of law. He lectured on these topics at law schools such as Baylor, Pepperdine, and Texas Tech, and he co-authored a legal treatise on the law of judicial precedent. In 2016, Baylor Law Review dedicated a volume of its journal to recognizing and honoring the profound impact Judge Reavley had on Texas and American law. And the volume included an article co-authored by Judge Reavley, characteristically titled, "Against the Rule of Judges," where Judge Reavley said, "The common good is best served by faithful adherence to the rule of law and not by individual judges seeking good in individual cases." That was Judge Reavley.
Perhaps because of his 40-something years serving on the federal court, or perhaps just because it was so long ago, many people often forget that Judge Reavley served for 9 years on the Supreme Court of the state of Texas from 1968 until 1977, writing by my count, and I think David Furlow or somebody will correct me after this, but according to my now somewhat rusty Westlaw research skills, 88 majority opinions, 2 opinions supporting majority opinions on rehearing, and 28 dissenting opinions. His majority opinions were remarkable for many reasons. They often resolved important constitutional issues, like 2 separate opinions, one in 1969 and another in 1976, upholding the constitutionality of the state's Sunday closing laws. or his 1975 opinion in Ex parte Butler, holding that parties and witnesses enjoy a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination even when asked to give testimony in a civil case. They were also consistently eloquent, like his 1975 decision in Southern Pacific Transportation, upholding trial judges' discretion to dismiss cases for want of prosecution, which he sported with the simple phrase, "Delay haunts the administration of justice." And in hindsight, his decisions were quite impactful. Like, for those of you who live just southwest of here, his 1971 decision in City of Westlake Hills versus City of Austin, in which he reversed a Court of Appeals judgment that had held that the City of Westlake Hills could no longer exist because its incorporation in 1953 was a sham and completely null and void. He found otherwise, and we're all Chaps fans now. But perhaps even more impactful in the long run was his 1970 decision in Texas Aeronautics Commission versus Braniff Airways, upholding the state commission's issuance of a certificate of public necessity and convenience to allow a fledgling new venture called Air Southwest Co. to provide interstate flights between Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio. You know where this is going. Reversing both the trial court and the Court of Appeals, he found that the new airline's proposed low prices helped justify the permit, explaining that Southwest planned to charge only $14.95 per flight, which was a great improvement over the $19 per flight that Braniff, Continental, and Trans-Texas Airways were charging at the time. So 50 years later, those of us who've learned to want to get away have Judge Reavley to thank. But perhaps even more remarkable, and I would say challenging, were his 88 majority opinions were his 28 dissenting opinions, which almost without exclusion are shorter than the introductory paragraphs of the dissents that we, or I guess I should confess, I typically issue these days. In these consistently brief descriptions of his inability to agree with his colleagues, he was always to the point, and we see both his humility and the wit of his wisdom to crisp little explanations like this. This, referring to the majority, is a rule that will not wear well. Or, so long as the court leaves the law to permit this state of affairs, we promote neither peace nor equity. Or, we choose here, referring to the majority, whom to believe and whom to disbelieve. But I had thought that this was the function of the jury. Or, and perhaps my favorite, is his 1972 dissent in Member Mutual versus Kutea, the whole entirety of which says, I agree with the opinion of the Court of Civil Appeals. I know you're all going to ask me, and yes, I will try to do that someday. A fellow teamer clerk, as we referred to him, and there are several among us, but one named Brian Garner, who, as I hear, knows a little bit about good legal writing, summed up Judge Reavley's approach like this. Reavley has long detested the prevalent judicial habit of overwriting opinions by needlessly rehashing the entire history of an area of law before deciding the case at hand. He believes that many lengthy opinions result from either outsized judicial egos or wordy law clerks ambitious to make their mark by transforming judicial opinions into something resembling bad law review articles. He also thinks that overlong opinions confuse the state of the law. In short, Brian wrote, Judge Reavley didn't waste the reader's time. Very true, but what he did do was dedicate 9 years of impeccable service to this court and to the people of this state, and we are all better for it.
Judge Reavley loved others so well, and we all loved him back. I was very fortunate to get to sit with him many times, often in our Houston courthouse. And I would also go by and visit him frequently. And you have some little candies there on your desk. I found that he liked these on your table. He liked these candies quite a bit. So I would often carry some little Hershey candies. I'm sorry, Carolyn, but I would take him little candies, and he would help me. He taught me the mechanics of what does an appellate judge actually affirm or reverse, not an issue, but a judgment. He was very precise in that, and he was very patient in teaching me that. He taught me how to write a Reavley PC, which is a term of art on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, a very succinct opinion. I'm very grateful to him for that, and I hope you enjoy some candy tonight in his honor.
Finally, Judge Elrod and I, in preparing for this evening, agreed that we could not adequately pay tribute to Tom Reavley without acknowledging the importance of his lifelong faith in a powerful and benevolent Creator. He was a Methodist lay preacher and Sunday school teacher throughout his life, beginning with the first sermon that he now quite famously gave at the age of 14, in which he challenged his East Texas congregation in the mid-1930s, mind you, to acknowledge and address the injustice of racial segregation. As St. Paul would say, Tom Reavley knew whom he believed and was not ashamed of the good news that motivated his life and public service. Not too many years ago, Judge Reavley mentioned to Judge Elrod that he loved the old Christian hymn, "His Eye is on the Sparrow." That conversation led to a tradition in which Judge Elrod would sing that hymn for Judge Reavley every year on his birthday. So, begging the indulgence of those of you of different faiths who are with us tonight, we thought it would be fitting to close this tribute by joining together in one verse from that hymn. I know even before the national anthem, many of you were already aware of Judge Elrod's amazing gift for singing, and there's a reason you've never heard the same about me. But I have agreed to join with her in the chorus if you all will do the same.
Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart be lonely and long for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is He. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. I'm free. For His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. Thank you.
Warren Harris will now give the Fellows report on behalf of David Beck, who is the chair of the Fellows. Warren?
Thanks, Cynthia. Being in the classroom and teaching students about the rule of law is one of the most important things we can do to educate the next generation. The generosity of the Fellows allows the Society to undertake projects to educate the bar and the public on the third branch of government and the history of our Supreme Court. A major educational project of the Fellows is Taming Texas, a judicial civics program for 7th grade Texas history classes that puts judges and lawyers in classrooms. The Fellows' support has allowed us to produce a series of books for this project. The first book, Taming Texas, How Law and Order Came to the Lone Star State, was published in 2016 and became the centerpiece of the judicial civics and court history curriculum. The first Taming Texas book covers the evolution of our state's legal system from the colonial era through the present day. The second book, which was published in 2017 and entitled Law in the Texas Frontier, focuses on how life on the open frontier was shaped by changing laws in Texas. The third book, published in 2020, is entitled The Chief Justices of Texas and contains interesting stories about the 27 Chief Justices of the Texas Supreme Court. And I want to give an update on our latest book. We're pleased to report that the manuscript for the fourth book in the series is nearing completion. The latest book, which will be entitled Taming Texas, Women in the Law, will educate the readers on many of the important women in the legal history of our state. The book will contain biographical information on the featured lawyers and judges and also discusses the associated historical and political issues. I've read parts of this manuscript, and it's going to be another great book. Chief Justice Hecht has recently agreed to write the foreword for this book, as he has done for the prior 3 volumes. We'd like to thank Chief Justice Hecht for all of his support of this program. Thank you, Chief. As I mentioned, this program puts judges and lawyers in the classroom teaching students about judicial civics. We've partnered with the Houston Bar Association to take the Taming Texas project into the schools across the Houston area. In the last 6 years, HBA volunteers have taught the program to over 22,000 7th graders in the Houston area. Chairs of the Houston program have included Justice Brett Busby, Judge Jennifer Elrod, Justice Ken Wise, Justice Francis Borleo, and David Furlow. We're glad to report that our Taming Texas series is growing beyond Houston. The Dallas Bar Association began teaching Taming Texas in 2018, and we continue to grow the project in other areas of the state. And finally, I would like to recognize the fellows who are in attendance this evening and ask that they please stand so that we can express our appreciation. Got a lot of fellows in the room. On behalf of the Society, I want to thank all the fellows for the generous support which makes this educational program and other projects of the Society worthwhile for us to do. Thank you very much.
Believe it or not, this is a carefully scripted event that we're putting on tonight. And according to the script, I now have 4 minutes to tell you everything that the Society did last year, which reminds me of the song Guns and Ships from Hamilton, where Daveed Diggs manages to rap 6.3 words per second. But I am not going to do that. I instead am going to just try to hit the highlights. So let me start with the Journal Committee, who puts out the Society's journal. They do such a fabulous job. And then the editor-in-chief, John Browning, could not be here tonight. But just to let you know, the journal this past year put out a journal that was focused on the civil rights movement in Texas. And then it put out 2 issues focused on the contributions made by Texans of Latin heritage. And what was very heartwarming. After our first issue, we received a very kind letter from the State Bar Hispanic Issues section, who made a contribution to the society and thanked us for covering people of Latin origin. We also joined up with the State Bar Appellate section, and we sponsored an evening with the Texas Supreme Court via Zoom, as everything was required to be a year ago. And it was moderated by Justice Beth Watkins of the San Antonio Court of Appeals, who did a fabulous job, and all of the Texas Supreme Court participated in that. I checked the other day, the program is still up on the Supreme Court's YouTube channel, and it now has gotten very close to 12,000 views. So we've gone viral. We presented two very interesting papers at the Texas State Historical Association annual meeting. One of those papers was by Professor Dana Berry of the University of Texas, and the other was by Stephen Pate, who is on our board, and David Keltner moderated that, and so that was a very nice program. This is not the most exciting thing we did, but we drafted and adopted financial controls and audit requirements for the society, and we can thank Rich Phillips back here headed that up. But those are very important structural components for an organization, and so we were able to do that. We are also working on our website and our archived materials to try to find a place to put out our archived materials so that the public will have better access to them, and that's an ongoing project. An organization like this depends on the people who generously donate their time, and we have had an abundance of those people. I would like to especially thank the people who served on the executive committee: Tom Leatherberry, the Honorable Ken Wise, Rich Phillips, Lisa Hobbs, Judge Xavier Rodriguez, and Jasmine Winton. And I would like to thank all of those people for their hard work. I will specially mention Judge Xavier Rodriguez and Jasmine Winton because the first moment that they were placed on the board, I asked them to please serve on the Journal Committee. When they attended their first meeting of the Journal Committee, they were instantly handed writing assignments, which they very politely and kindly took up and executed, and they have done a wonderful job. They had baptism by fire, both of those two. I would also like to thank David Furlow, who's a longtime member of our board, who is always keeping us on task and finding more things for us to do in the way of promoting history in the state of Texas. This feeds into our next event, which is the President's Award. I get to hand out an award to anybody I want to give it to, and it's very exciting. There were a lot of contenders for the award, and I have to admit I went back and forth as to who this should go to, but I finally made a decision. The person who is receiving the award definitely earned it. That person, in the 1 year that I was president, wrote 2 lead articles for the Society's Journal, wrote a feature article for the Journal, wrote a lengthy paper for and made a presentation for the Society at the Texas State Historical Association meeting. He interviewed author Doug Swanson, who wrote a book about the Texas Rangers, and did that for a board meeting at the Society. And he managed to do all of that while also having COVID last year. So our award goes to, and I want him to come down, Stephen Pate. At this time, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, who is Lisa Blatt. Lisa graduated from UT Law School in 1989, and she is now at William & Connolly in Washington, D.C., where she chairs their appellate practice group. Lisa has argued 42 cases to the United States Supreme Court, and she prevailed in the vast majority of those cases. She is Chambers USA's national appellate, highest-rated female appellate attorney. She is above Band 1. She is a star individual. The other star individuals are Seth Waxman, Don Varelli, Carter Phillips, and Paul Clement. It is an illustrious crowd that she runs with. Lisa has represented a wide variety of people, including the heirs of Marvin Gaye, the Washington Redskins, and most recently the Mahanoy Area School District against a cheerleader named BL. And you'll hear about that in a little bit. But importantly, Lisa clerked for Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg when Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg was on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. And that is why she is speaking to us tonight. She will be talking about the life and career of Justice Ginsburg. Now, if you are looking around the room trying to find Lisa Blatt, and you're not able to see her, there is a reason for that. Unfortunately, when we moved the dinner from September to December, we ran into interference with Lisa's very involved United States Supreme Court practice, and so she could not be here. But Sharon Sandel, who is our executive director, came to the rescue. She happened to know somebody who was with the D.C. Circuit Bar Association. The D.C. Circuit Bar Association has a brand new building. They have a state-of-the-art video equipment, and so they worked with us to film an interview with Lisa, and that is what we are showing tonight, and so let's go to the movies.
Lisa, I want to thank you so much for agreeing to be our speaker this year at the Texas Supreme Court Historical Society Annual Dinner. It's great to see you.
Of course, you too.
Yes. You have grown into, as a lawyer, a very enviable United States Supreme Court practice that I have been able to follow in recent years. And why don't you tell us how it was that you ended up migrating into that practice?
Well, mostly by accident. I started out my practice at Williams & Connolly doing white-collar criminal work, and the Solicitor General's office was looking for women and had called me over the years to try to get me to apply, first under Ken Starr and then under Drew Days. And I finally applied, but it was not something I thought. I wanted to first be a tax lawyer and then be a white-collar criminal defense lawyer. So that's not how I ended up.
And so how was it that, I know that that's a typical path, to go from the Solicitor General's office to a United States Supreme Court practice, but spell that out a little bit for us. How did that transition occur? What did you do for the Solicitor General's office and then in private practice after that?
Yeah, so I spent 13 years in the SG's office, which was definitely much longer than most people. Most people try to spend anywhere from 3 to 5 years and then move on either into teaching or private practice. I had 2 children in the office, went part-time. I took a sort of circuitous route. It was very important for me to take a lot of time off for my kids. And so it just took me longer to get through that office. So 13 years was a very long time, and ended up arguing 27 cases there. I think I served under 9 Solicitor Generals, either acting or full-time, several administrations, all through 9/11, the Clinton administration through the beginning of the Obama administration. So the last Solicitor General was Elena Kagan. So it was, I don't know, a long time, and I didn't even think I wanted to go into private practice. I think I wanted to be a reporter at one point. I tried to get a job in the Obama administration. That was an abject failure, and so I ended up at a law firm. But, you know, very happy where I am now. But again, I think my life is a lot of, I wanted something else, and I ended up not getting what I wanted and ending up, you know, on my feet anyway by just, I think, you know, my whole advice to people is just try not to do so much what you want, but do what you're good at. And so I think I ended up where I am now, despite maybe where I wanted to be.
That's interesting. And that'll be interesting when we get into Justice Ginsburg's life, who I think had much of the same experience. She did not, starting out, get to do what she wanted, but ended up doing something better than what she wanted. But first, before we get to Justice Ginsburg, you have had a recent, very interesting case that I'm sure that our audience would like to hear about, and it's the case that we call the cursing cheerleader case. And I think a lot of people are familiar with that case in general, but I was wondering if you could share with us some stories about that case.
Sure. So the extent to which schools can regulate student speech is just always fascinated me, particularly where we stand today with higher education and what I tend to think is somewhat of an elite stance by universities and their somewhat intolerance for academic freedom and expression. So I've always been fascinated by this subject, and usually most strongly in the area of pro-First Amendment. But in this case, I represented the school who had, the coaches had suspended BL from the JV cheerleading team because of her Snapchat. But the case itself, what was so fascinating, and I think what the court had so much trouble grappling with, both at oral argument and even in the opinion, was sort of two areas that I think either divide us as a society or we're having trouble working through. Of course, the court held that schools can, in some instances, regulate off-campus speech, basically speech on social media, in narrow circumstances that sort of threatens teachers and other students, or things like hacking or cheating. But in the area of political speech or religious speech, the school would need a special justification. And the two areas that the court didn't come out completely, although Justices Gorsuch and Alito felt pretty strongly about, and I feel very strongly about, were the areas of bullying and political and controversial speech, racist speech, sexist speech, what have you, speech about Israeli conflict, really any number of things that we argue about. What does bullying mean? Certainly when I grew up, there was a lot of bullying that was tolerated. Now it's not so clear. Schools, both at the higher education and lower education, are trying to keep kids from killing themselves, and at the same time, there has got to be some tolerance for speech, or it's too much discipline. It's really hard to answer those questions. It's very hard to answer it, but and the court did not. But there's a balance between what needs to be being able to intervene early enough to prevent something bad happening, but also to sort of make sure there's an environment of a breathing space. Another area which is near and dear to my heart, especially for this audience, is political speech or controversial speech. Can you wear a T-shirt to school with an AK-47 or a Confederate flag, or don't tread on me, or come and take it, I think is the popular expression. And the answer, in my view, should be, yeah, maybe. Or I think the example we talked about at oral argument is a T-shirt that says abortion is murder. In my view, students should be able to wear those kind of shirts to school, but in a lot of people's view, absolutely not. And the court didn't answer that question. They just said you'd need a heavy justification. But this is an area where people have strong opinions. Should we try to protect the most sensitive person in the school environment from speech that they might find unpleasant and prevents them from having a learning environment? or should we teach kids to be more resilient towards such controversial speech? I stand on one extreme, but there's very good arguments to be made for the other extreme.
Well, let's turn to the reason that I initially reached out to you. And let me say that when Justice Ginsburg passed away last year, I was listening to the funeral service that they were having, and I listened. I'm a traditional NPR listener. As I turned on NPR that morning, I, of course, heard Nina Totenberg. And then along with Nina Totenberg was another commentator named Lisa Blatt. And I remember thinking at that moment, Lisa, I know Lisa. Lisa would be a great speaker to our group. And what better topic than the late Justice Ginsburg. And that's why I reached out to you, and that's why we're talking today. And I know that you clerked for Justice Ginsburg. So how was it that you came to clerk for Justice Ginsburg? And I think it was on the Court of Appeals. She was still on the Court of Appeals when you clerked for her. So tell us about how that came to pass.
Sure. So I'm Justice Ginsburg's only clerk from the University of Texas. I got that clerkship because of Charles Allen Wright in a class I took at the University of Texas on a Supreme Court seminar. Professor Wright obviously is a giant, and a giant in her world because she was such a civil procedure fanatic. It was, again, somewhat of an accident that I had got a clerkship with her. I had gotten an interview with another judge on the DC Circuit, the late Judge Mikva, and called Justice Ginsburg's chambers and said, I'm going to be in Washington anyway, will you please interview me? And did that to every judge on the DC Circuit, and got an interview with her and Judge Williams. And I got a job offer on the spot. I actually knew very little of her, and I think from that very interview to my last conversation with her has always been the same. I always had a very special relationship with the justice, and I remember my interview, I really didn't talk very much about the law because I wasn't one of her typical hires, sort of from Harvard and on the law review. Even though I was on the law review, I just wasn't that much of a law nerd like her. But there was this other side of Justice Ginsburg that I think we bonded over, which was just laughter and clothes and shoes and jewelry. And so that was my currency with her. I mean, obviously I had very good grades at UT and was qualified to clerk, but I definitely connected with her, I think, in a different way because she loved to laugh. And, I constantly tried to make her laugh. It wasn't that hard, but because most people are so serious around her, or were so serious around her. But I didn't really know much about her. Obviously, I learned a ton about her when I was clerking. And, it was a little bit out of my element when I got there, but I tried to catch up as best as I could.
What was she was not the famous person that she ended up being years later. So what was your first impression of her when you met her?
Well, she was famous in sort of her academic world and her world of feminism, I think, because she had argued all those famous cases. But no, she wasn't on the Supreme Court. She was this little old lady who wore a blue coat all the time to work. And it was because she was on her way to I think it was called Jazzercise. I think that was the name of the class. She would come in at around 11 a.m. and we would leave at whenever we left, and she would be there till, who knows. She had very odd working hours, and she continued to have those odd working hours all the way up until her death. So she just had her own set ways, which it had definitely an impact on me because she kept a schedule that no one else kept. She dressed however she wanted. I remember, in addition to the blue coat, Whenever we had, I mean, she always wore her, her suits and her fancy shoes and jewelry at functions, and then her black robe, but at social functions as opposed to professional functions, she would wear these kafkans and all these like flowing things with colors. And I always just, now, I mean, it's the way I dress, but I always thought, oh my God, she just looks like she looks different, and she just didn't care. She was obviously wearing whatever she wanted to wear because she bought it when she was traveling, or it had a story, or she just felt comfortable in it. And it had definitely an impact on me that, sure, she dressed professionally, and she did give me a lot of advice, by the way, about how to dress in court over the years. But out of court, I think she just was very much an individual and felt like she just wanted to be her and who she was and not try to conform to look like everyone else in the room. So anyway, that was my impression of her, in addition to being really very demanding in terms of just how focused she was on the business of judging.
Yeah. So let's touch on a couple of these things. I think if we didn't know before she died, we learned at her death with her trainer at her funeral what an exercise fanatic she was. So it sounds like she was always an exercise fanatic.
She was, and I think she didn't eat very much. I mean, she was so little, and I think part of, and I know we'll talk about her status as the notorious RBG, but part of that was how oversized her voice was compared to her physical appearance. She's always tiny. And yes, she did exercise a lot. It was aerobic. I think later in life, she would talk about, the importance of building muscle mass for bone structure. And so I think she got that advice. But wow, back in 96, she was exercising every day. But it was these little jazzercise classes, which I think we tried, the clerks tried jazzercise. It was a disaster for me, but I know the court offered it and she did it. Yeah, but she was always into whatever form of exercise she could do. But I'm not even sure if she didn't exercise or if she did eat a lot, she would gain weight. She was just very tiny.
Yeah. And then you mentioned that she gave you advice on what to wear to court. And so for the younger members of our audience, what advice was that?
I think she understood for women, I mean, men, it's so easy. You have a uniform, you have a suit. I think she, at least for women appearing in the Supreme Court, what do you wear? Do you dress like a man? Do you dress like a woman? And the advice she gave me was, you want the justices focusing on what you're saying, not on what you look like. And so, bland it. Dark suit, everyone in the SG's office wore dark suit, minimal jewelry. So I would always try to keep that in mind. It's funny, as I've gotten older, I don't take her advice so seriously because I figured, shouldn't judges just be able to handle what I look like? But she was right, of course. You want the judge or justice just listening, not going, did she just change her hair color? Or, having their mind wander.
So you said that she was tough to clerk for, and so tell us about that.
She wasn't tough to clerk for in that, so she was tough to clerk for in that I think, I probably speak for all of her clerks in that I felt like I was never good enough. And that was because she was just so perfect with the writing and the absence of typos and the grammar. And she was so intense and faster than everyone. And I think it was just hard to feel like you were good enough. She didn't need me at all. By the time I was clerking on the DC Circuit, she knew more law than her clerks. She would often have the opinions written before I could get to the bench memo, and she would come to conference sometimes saying, well, I've drafted this little opinion if you want to adopt it. So I don't know how useful I was to her as a clerk. In that sense, it gave you a feeling of inadequacy. Like, yeah, she was very sweet and wonderful, but I never felt like I was adding value to her.
So, but that was an inadequacy that just grew up from working around her as opposed to an inadequacy that she imposed upon you.
Oh, she never said anything remotely. That's not
Yeah.
Justice Ginsburg's style.
Yeah.
Her style was just to do the work herself. So there was never a sense of, no, she seems, I mean, she married so many of her law clerks. She was so invested in their future, so close to so many of us that, I mean, no. It's just that because she was such a legal giant, she just knew so much law and was so fast that it was just, I felt very inadequate.
How did she interact with her fellow judges? I think she had a rather famous friendship on the Supreme Court with Justice Scalia. And how did she overall
Sure, so
interact?
that's another huge impact. I think being from Texas, first of all, when I grew up, the Democrats were conservative and the Republicans were liberal, so we all got along. I mean, everyone loved everybody. I don't know if it's changed. So I kind of had when I got to the DC Circuit, didn't realize there was so much polarization outside of Texas among sort of people on the right and people on the left, at least among the clerks. And Justice Ginsburg was extremely close with Judge Lawrence Silberman and then Judge Scalia. No, Justice Scalia, but he had been a judge with then Judge Ginsburg on the DC Circuit. And those were her two closest friends from the DC Circuit. And so when we planned her 10th year reunion that year, the two members of Article 3 were Judge Silberman and Justice Scalia. Those were the people she wanted. And so, I mean, we never talked about it, but what an impression on me. She was clearly liberal, and Justice Silberman, conservative, Justice Scalia, very conservative. Those were her friends. And you know, only later in life, I mean, they had the opera, but I remember reunion after reunion, and one of these particularly very contentious terms on the Supreme Court at a reunion. It may have been the year, I'd have to look it up, of the partial birth abortion case. I don't know, it was a bad year for conservatives, or at least a bad two decisions. Justice Scalia came in, and he was just clearly not in a good mood. It was right at the end of the term, but he came in because he had to speak at Justice Ginsburg reunion. I mean, there was no question. And he then immediately just beamed and was such in a good mood and raving about her. And then he walked out kind of grumpy again. But it was, he wasn't going to miss her no matter how mad he was. And he loved her, and it was the most amazing thing to watch.
So how do you feel that she and they managed that relationship through difficult times like that?
I mean, well, I know pretty firsthand. I mean, Justice Scalia would tell his law clerks, she can do no wrong, and you know, no matter how much they disagreed. And I just think it was the same way. She just beamed. She had although she was very serious, she had a very hard time not beaming when she was happy about something, and if his name came up, she just beamed. So, and I will tell you, I know why. He made her laugh. She loved him. They both loved the law, they loved the opera, and there was a part of her that had no trouble putting aside the fact that, I like to say that the way I look at the world is that conservatives are people too. Just because they're wrong on the way they think doesn't mean they don't deserve to be loved. And she just loved him, and it didn't matter what his views were on the law. They fought over all kinds of stuff dealing with the roles. I think their biggest brouhaha intellectually was the remedial power of federal courts. You know, one is limited, one is expansive. Very deep issues. Completely different views of, you know, the way the common law should dictate the shape of the law. Okay, great. They had that disagreement. Now let's go have some fun. Let's drink fine wine and love the opera. And it has, Paul Clement, who former clerk of Justice Scalia, former Solicitor General, who's argued 100 cases. I've taught with him now for 5 years. He's one of my biggest and closest professional colleagues. Very conservative, and I'm liberal, and I love Paul, and he's I think was impacted by Justice Scalia's view of Justice Ginsburg in the same way. Even in later, as Justice Ginsburg's health was failing and she just got older, Justice Thomas could not have been more kind to her. You know, when everyone else was just rushing to get up from anything, he would go over to her and make sure she could get up. And it just made me want to cry how incredibly sweet he was, and it was appreciated by her, just these acts of kindness. It really didn't matter if they were disagreeing. He was just really decent to her. Justice Kavanaugh, the same way. She remarked to me what a kind person he had been to her. And she related this one story. It was an event, I remember the event, I think it was at the Library of Congress for Justice O'Connor, and people made appearances, but Justice Kavanaugh came and stayed to the very end. And that impacted her because it said to her, what a nice man. And she loved the fact that he had hired so many female clerks. So she just had this great way of not worrying about someone's legal views or political views if they were a wonderful person. And what a great way to go through the world.
Yes, I agree. Due to your relationship, your clerkship for, and your relationship with Justice Ginsburg, how did that affect you as a practicing lawyer? How did that affect the way that you deal with cases and clients, et cetera?
Sure, a couple things. And I mean, you get a window into the justices' views of the world and judges' views of the world through their opinions, some of their talks, their books, et cetera. The thing I learned sort of early on from when we were clerking, she sort of two aspects that just feel the same way. Her attention to the facts of the case and the equities of the parties. I don't know when she stopped doing this, but she had her tradition. All her clerks would go to visit prisons and jails. We went to the DC jail, a minimum security prison or prison for women, and then it was either a medium security or maximum security. I don't remember which one, but why on the DC circuit I was visiting prisons was beyond me. I mean, I was doing ad law, FERC. I needed to understand principles of standing and Chevron, and here I was at the DC jail. And I don't think she ever even explained why she was doing it. It was just, it's jail week. And yet it was kind of just sort of obvious. She wanted us to see that like a piece of the criminal justice system. She also made us, it was Judge Hogan, we would sit through parts of his proceedings. Like she just wanted us to go down there and watch him either whatever he was doing, jury selection or whatever, to see that there was a trial court. And why she wanted us to do this, again, I think she just wanted us to get out of our ivory tower maybe. But you could tell from also the way she, both on the DC circuit and then much later, and I can talk about one of the cases in a minute, she just cared about not knowing that there was more than just a legal principle involved, but there were two parties whose lives were going to be affected by the decision. And sometimes in the appellate world, you can lose sight of that, and I never did, and it is definitely reflected in my briefing, is I want to and I do argue, I argue with both Paul and several justices about this, of course, judges like to believe that doctrine guides them. I like to believe that, sure, we'll get the doctrine there, but I think you're a human being and there's some psychology going on, and I want you, the judge, to feel good about voting for my side. So I want some human element in all the cases, and that's definitely from her. I'm sure, judges listening to this are going to say, that's not me, but I'm going to keep on my approach, trying to appeal to human nature.
Well, speaking of that opinion, did she have certain opinions that were her favorites over the years?
She liked a lot of different cases, and she liked to talk, as you probably all know. She liked to talk about the court and the law. Her obvious two favorites were the VMI case that struck down the all-male policy at the Virginia Military Institute. Very controversial decision at the time, and I don't know if it's still controversial, but that was sort of her claim to fame. It was this huge opinion for women's rights. And then, of course, though, the one that she had all the pictures of in her office and talked about endlessly was, it's funny, it's not her opinion, it's a dissent in the Lilly Ledbetter case, 2007. And it was a case involving Title VII. And it was an accessible fact pattern. A woman had been allegedly, of course, discriminated against on the matter of pay based on a pay decision. And then that decision affected her paycheck, throughout the course of her career. And the question was, was it too late to sue in the later years because the decision was made such a long time ago outside the limitations period? And she wanted to at least sue for the paychecks that were within the limitations period, and the court held 5-4, nope.
Yeah.
And she wrote this huge dissent saying, give me a break, how would you even know at the time the decision was made that your male counterparts were being treated differently. Any event, controversial decision. Justice Alito wrote the majority, but she was very upset by that. And President Obama's first legislative act or executive act or whatever, first legislation he signed as president was the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act overturning the Ledbetter decision. And Obama could do no wrong after that. No wrong. I mean, I think she even had the, whatever you want to call those little things she wore from the day she read her dissent framed in her office. I mean, that may be exaggerating. She loved that story.
I am curious about Justice Ginsburg, her fame that she acquired late in life. And was that something that she enjoyed? Was that something that she used in any particular way?
I don't know if she used it. She certainly enjoyed it. I think she liked that, now I'm confusing this with my own views, at her funeral, watching the women go by the public viewing wearing the RBG t-shirts, notorious RBG t-shirts, that's when I kind of lost it. She liked that it was an inspiration for people. It arose allegedly out of her dissent in the Lilly Ledbetter case. I don't know if it was just that, Shelby County, excuse me. It was her dissent in the Shelby County voting rights case. She was very upset about that dissent, as a lot of liberals are. And she had gotten this sort of, I dissent and I'm gonna speak out. And somehow that resonated with rap. And because she on rap. No, she listened to opera. So it was just such juxtaposition between her persona and the notorious RBG of rap. I mean, later in life, because I'll know this, I think her goal was to stay alive. And she did not like being sick. She just kept getting sick and kept having cancer. And I think as where someone like me would just be, I don't want to die. Her view was, I need to keep working. Mm-hmm. And this is interfering with my work. And so that's that's the way she was when clerking. She's just so serious about work, didn't want to miss work. Chemo or radiation, great, I need to write my opinion. So she was just so, like I said, she just took judging so seriously. But she did not like, she didn't like being sick. But I could tell, talking about that kind of fun fame would cheer her up because it was amusing.
Yeah.
I don't think it changed the way, no, it didn't change her judging, it didn't change her personality, but I think she just found it amusing because she liked having her voice heard.
Well, I want to thank you so much for giving us your time here
Thank
today.
you.
All right, well, we've come pretty close to the end. We're not quite there, but you're almost rid of me. So I would now like to invite to the podium the Society's liaison to the Texas Supreme Court, Justice Jane Bland, and the Society's next president, who is Tom Leatherberry, and he will now be sworn in.
So the role of the liaison to this illustrious group is to marvel at their excellent scholarship, to enjoy their camaraderie, and to express the thanks and appreciation from our court for everything that you all have accomplished, and in particular, Cynthia and Tom. During this pandemic, the level of scholarship continued unabated. And Georgia O'Keefe, from her second floor of rental apartment in the Panhandle, marveled about the big, wonderful thing that is Texas. And I know this because Stephen Harrigan came and spoke to our group via Zoom and told that story and wrote a book about Texas, the big, wonderful thing. And I like to think that this dinner is a big, wonderful thing tonight. So glad that everyone's here, and I just want to express the appreciation of the Supreme Court for all of you who helped make it possible, and just how delightful it is to have this opportunity to spend this time in person in each other's company. And with that, Tom. I, Tom Leatherberry,
I, Tom Leatherberry,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will administer the office of President
that I will administer the office of President
of the Texas Supreme Court Historical Society
of the Texas Supreme Court Historical Society
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
I pledge to faithfully discharge
I pledge to faithfully discharge
my duties to preserve for posterity
my duties to preserve for posterity
the lives and work of the Supreme Court
the lives and work of the Supreme Court
and the appellate courts of Texas.
and the appellate courts of Texas.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
That was easy.
Good job.
Congratulations, Cindy. So I've got very big shoes to fill. Cindy has done a phenomenal job. I know you all laughed at the bylaws, but we took a lot of time on that, and that's really important. Look, because I know I alone stand between you and the lounge upstairs, I only have a few brief acknowledgments and thank yous. First, I want to acknowledge the other officers of the Society and ask them to stand. President-elect Justice Ken Wise, Vice President Rich Phillips, Treasurer Lisa Boland-Hobbs, and our Secretary Jasmine Winton. And I would really be remiss if I didn't thank Cynthia Timms for doing a fabulous, fabulous job. She's going nowhere. I know where she lives. Second, I'd like to acknowledge as a group the other members of the Society's Board of Trustees and ask them to stand. Thank you so much. The Society has a great, dedicated, talented board, hardworking, and we're looking forward to another great year. Third, I'd like to acknowledge the legendary Texas appellate lawyers and judges who were inducted this year into the Texas Appellate Hall of Fame yesterday. The Honorable Frank G. Evans III, the Honorable Samuel D. Johnson, Jr., the Honorable Thomas M. Reavley, and Royal H. Bryn, Jr. Fourth, I'd like to thank all of our sponsors for tonight's dinner, those who purchased tables, and those who supported tonight's events in other ways. And this is the best part. I get to thank our talented and hardworking staff, our Executive Director, Sharon Sandel, and our Administrator, Mary Sue Miller. You would not have dinner tonight without them. Thank you both so much. COVID presented challenges for all nonprofits, and Sharon and Mary Sue kept us moving in the right direction in double time, and that was great. We also have a great journal staff headed by Karen Patton and ably assisted by Kevin Carlson and David Kroll. Finally, I know it's like in conclusion, please mark your calendars for next year's dinner. We'll be back together again here on Friday, September 9th, 2022, and we look forward to seeing you then. Stay safe and well and have a great holiday season. We're adjourned.